Okay, so Zok to Gemara Nachamo. Mitzudas chayes fa'oifos v'dagim yeshben. If they have a container like pligi, everybody agrees. In fact, that as Rashi says, they keep in the yeshben toich since they have it inside to them. Therefore, kana lakelov v'gesel gomer. The trapper is kainit and it's gesel gomer. Ki pligi, where is there a machloikis b'lechi v'kukri? Lechi v'kukri are types of traps that don't have an internal container. For instance, Rashi says if you have a line with a whole bunch of hooks on the line, so if fish bite onto the hooks and get stuck, that definitely traps the fish. But it's not in your keli, and you wouldn't be caught it. Kukri is a type of funnel made out of reeds. But the funnel does not come to a point. It gets cut off. So an animal swims into the funnel and its head gets stuck out the narrow end of the funnel, can't get through because the rest of his body wouldn't fit. It tries to pull back, the reeds that are pushing forward grab the animal. So it gets stuck in there. So once again, it traps the animal, but although it traps the animal, I'm not sure if a fish net has a container. I know when they lift up the fish net, it actually forms a bag, but I'm not sure what it looks like in the water. I know there's an ancient method of fishing that the Gemara refers to that we don't use nowadays, but if you go into the narrows in between Lake Simcoe and Lake Kuchiching, they actually show the remnants of that method of fishing from the Indians from way back when. And basically what they do is they put a whole bunch of small vertical posts in the water, and then they run reeds across them, which formed a little bit of a net. And as fish swam through the area they would get trapped in. So that also is a way of catching fish, but there's no base kibble. So you cannot say that your kalim would have been koined for you. I'm just setting up the big screen now for a second. Okay, I think we're good now. That's correct. So Zok to Gemara, that's the type of net they're arguing about, a net that's not kind of what's inside it. Matthias Cheresh Shoyte V'Katan, we said, really a Cheresh Shoyte V'Katan cannot be koina. Nevertheless, with the Dakar Shalom, we will not take away the Matthias from them. But Rabbi Yossi said it's Gesel Gomer. Not only is it Midivreim that we don't take it away from them, it's Gesel Gomer. What does it mean, Gesel Gomer? It's only Midirbanan. Zok to Gemara, Amr Chista Gesel Gomer Midivreim. L'mayin afkamina lo yitzir b'dayanim. Zok Rashi, Midivreim afilu Rabbi Yossi lav Gesel Daraisa. Even according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not Gesel Daraisa. So what's the difference if Midrabanan it's classified as Gesel? L'yitzir b'dayanim, the Rabbanan lo nafik b'dayanim. According to Rabbanan, there's tikkun olam not to take Matthias away from a Cheresh Shoyte V'Katan. But if someone did, we wouldn't go to that person and take it back from him. Because technically the Cheresh Shoyte V'Katan never owned it. You weren't allowed to take it, you took it. According to Rabbi Yossi, you would go and take it back for the person who took the mitzvah away from the Cheresh Shoyte V'Katan, but it doesn't make him into a gasel midaraisa. What is a gasel midaraisa? What are his restrictions? He's pasal eidos. He'll ever allow. This person is not. Yet you still take the money away from him. Ani amanakav b'rosh zayis. There's an ani who's knocking off fruits from the tree. Anything that falls down, even if he wasn't cutting it, no one's allowed to take from the pears that fell down underneath the tree. That's the takana because of tikkun olam, and the Rashi holds again that it's gesel midivreim. Zakir tana imlikit v'nosan biyad. What if he didn't just knock fruit off a tree? He actually picked the fruit and held it in his hand. So now he's koinit mida iraisa. Then Haresa gets on gomer. Now if someone takes it, he's a regular goslin because he owns it. Rav Kahana have a kahozol Hutzel. Rav Kahana was walking to the city of Hutzel. He saw someone that was, according to Rashi, he was throwing sticks at the trees and it was knocking down fruit. Ozal, command kitbach. So Rav Kahana went and took some. Amr lay. So the person who was doing this said, Chazimar, look, Rav Kahana, most of the fruit I'm picking by hand, so they're mine. So by you taking them, it's mamish gzela. How can you take it, Rav Kahana? Amr lay. So Rav Kahana said, wow, you must be from the city of Rabbi Yoshia, who teaches his people very well. As Rashi says, you know your stuff. Because Rabbi Yoshia gave shiurim to his balabatim and taught him. So he knew that when you pick it up, you're actually koinit. He referred to Rabbi Yoshia as Tzadik Yisrael Olam for educating his people so well. Tosfos asks, I don't understand. Reb Kahana didn't realize the guy was koinit. He just thought they were falling down. But does Reb Kahana not hold of our Mishnah that if they dakar shalom, you're not supposed to take those fruits? I saw from your eyes that that's what you were about to ask. So Tosfos answers beautifully. In fact, he learned that oifai are not sticks, and he wasn't throwing these things specifically to knock the fruit down. Because of course, then our Mishnah applies. You're not allowed to take those things. And Reb Kahana wouldn't have taken them. But what was is he was cutting branches of a date palm and dropping them down. So Rav Kahana thought, and as they fell down, they knocked down some dates as well. Rav Kahana thought that this fellow was only interested in the branches. Maybe he was selling schach. Rav Kahana thought that he wanted the branches but not the pears. He didn't realize that this fellow even had an interest in the pears, and that's why he was taking them. And then the man told, not only do I want them, many of them are rekoina as well, and therefore you're not allowed to take them. Gewaltig. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, Zok to more about it. Ein memachin biyad aniyei nochrim beleket b'shikl v'peya mepeidak shalom. If goyim want to take leket shikl v'peya, you don't stop them. Tanu Rabbanon mafarnisim aniyei nochrim im aniyei Yisrael. You're mafarnis aniyei nochrim together with aniyei Yisrael. So you're giving out tzedakah, and a guy knocks on your door while there's a yid there, you got to give him as well. Umavakin choyle nochim im choyle Yisrael. You make big choyle and choyle nochim im choyle Yisrael. The koivin meisei nochim im meisei Yisrael. Why mipnei dak b'shol? This here is also a very big shaila how it works. I'm sorry. So Rashi says that you bury goyim, that doesn't mean you bury them in the Jewish cemetery. You bury them in their own cemetery. But what is interesting to note is under what conditions do you have to give the goy money? Because if you look at the lashon of our Gemara and of our Mishnah, there's nuances. Look at this. You don't chase them away if they're collecting lekha chichul peah. However, by mefarnisim, it says mefarnisim ani nochim ani Yisrael. Ein memachem biyad ani nochim means you don't invite them to take lekha chichul peah. If they're collecting, you don't chase them away. But when you're giving tzedakah, you actually hand money to the guy. That's a lot more than not chasing them away. So there are those who learn that although you don't chase a guy away, however, you don't give, if a guy comes to you for tzedakah, you don't give him tzedakah. You only give him tzedakah is if you're in the middle of giving a Jew tzedakah and he comes while there's a Jew there. You don't say you yes and you no. You have to give them both. But stamazoi, if a guy knocks on your door, you don't have to give him tzedakah. And that's what it means. Exactly. If you're in the midst, if you're in the midst of giving tzedakah, you're not saying I'm not giving you. There's an issue of Dr. Shalom. But if a guy's time knocks on your door, you say I'm not giving because maybe you don't give tzedakah to anybody. The main thing is not to clearly show that distinction between a guy and a yid. Then it says it's the same thing. If you're in a room with a Jewish patient and a Goyish patient, you don't visit the Jewish patient and ignore the Goyish patient. And the same thing with Koivim. But there are those who hold that when it comes to Kvura and Bikacholim, could be you do have to visit them as well. So this always brings to my mind, what about Hatzolah? Hatzalah does respond to goyim if goyim call. We just don't promote it. So I wonder where that fits in. I was trying to find something on it, but I was not able to. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Masheles Isha lechaberta hachashuda ala shvius. Now, a woman who is chashed on shvius, meaning she'll use payers that she wasn't allowed to. You're not allowed to hoard any pair of shvius. It has to be available for everybody. You can use them as well. But to gather pears from the field and put it in your private pantry, that you're not allowed to do. What if you have a woman who we're choshy that she does it? We don't know for a fact that she does it, but we're choshy that she does it. Are you allowed to lend her tools that she would use to process those pears, or are you helping her do an avera? So the halach is mashelas isha lechaberto hachashuda l'shvius napa, a sifter, bekibra. These are different types of sifters with which they would sift the flour. V'rechaim is something which they grind. They grind the kernels into flour. So it sounds like napa and kibra are earlier in the process. I'm not sure, but I know that they're sifters.
The sifter is sieved.
But that's something that you do after you grind, not before you grind, right?
It depends. You might sift, for example, rice to take out the bugs, or wheat.
So that's right. Well, so it seems like we're talking about the sidur de pas, which means the order of how you prepare bread from planting wheat. So I thought this would be in order. So you're suggesting it's not in order because rechaya means the mill where it's ground into flour. If napa and kibra are used before they're milled, normally napa and kibra are used after they're milled, after they're flour, and you're sifting the flour to get finer flour. So I'm not sure if these are in order or not. Vitanor, as well as an oven, you're allowed to lend her an oven to bake bread. So you're allowed to lend her kalim to do that. Avaloi saver v'loi sitcha nima. But you shouldn't help her sort and grind together with her, because that's worse. That's l'saya. Then you're helping her. While someone is doing an avera, you're not allowed to help them do an avera. So you're not allowed to work with them, because this might be payers that are also to work on, but you're definitely allowed to lend her things that she might use in the course of doing this. Okay, gewaltig. Eish's chaver, the wife of a chaver, who is makpid on separating properly the trumais umaisois, mashelas le'eishas amaretz, she's allowed to lend her kalim napa v'kivra. If you notice, the rechaim and tanur is missing, but we'll soon see that Tosfos says, I believe, that it means the same thing. It means to include those as well. The napa v'kivra and ubayreres, she is allowed to actively work with her. V'toichenes, and grind with her. Umirakedes, it's also a type of sifting ima. So what it's saying here is although in the Reisha, when there's a chshad that she's doing an avera, by using pear shvius, she's not allowed to actively help, she's only allowed to lend her kalim. When there's a question of her having pears that maestros and trumas were not separated, so they might be tevel, there we allow. The question is, what's the difference? The Gemara is going to have to deal with that. Now, up until this point, we didn't deal with Tumah v'Tahira, because we know that anything that grows from the ground cannot become Tameh unless it came in contact with water. And now we're going to get to that point. The moment she mixes water in to create her dough, now everything could be Mekabel Tameh, can be Mekabel Tumah. There loy sigima. There she's not even allowed to touch the water flour mixture. Why? You're not allowed to help over avera. What is the avera? Zok Rashi. The moment they create the dough, now it's like tevel for challah. There's a chiyuv to separate challah from isa, and it has the kedusha of truma. But the problem is, since her kalim are tamei, the kamitama machmas kalim tameim, the dough will become tamei as it becomes dough. It never had a fighting chance. And she's helping her knead the dough. But also ligram tuma lachal. It's also to cause challah to become tamei. So here, when it's tevel, it's not actually challah yet, but I guess we consider the tevel of challah, since you're going to separate part of this to make it into challah, we look at this tevel as if there's challah content in it, and even that you're not allowed to make tumah. By you helping, you're actually assisting in being metama this tevel. And that we at least allow her to lend her kalim to her friend, that's only because of Dr. Shalom. So of course the Dr. Shalom isn't explaining why you're not allowed to knead with her when it's already wet. Rashi is going back on the earlier part of the Mishnah where she is allowed to lend out her kalim. Rashi says, you're actually allowed to help goyim take pears from the field to store them on Shvius. Goyim don't have a isser to use pear Shvius. Amaloi de Yisrael, you're definitely not allowed to help a yid store away pears in the Shemitah year. That's a davar ha'aser. And you're allowed to. This I think the Shvius. Whenever you see a goy, you're allowed to greet him. But the way Yidden greet the Shalom Aleichem, which is using Shem Hashem on a goy, yes, you're allowed to, because of Dr. Shalom, they don't want you to you don't want them to accuse you of treating them different. It's very interesting that we're learning this now, as the Lublin strikes again, because last week was the yard side of Mendel Bayless, I believe. Mendel Bayless was one of the last high-profile blood libels that occurred in Russia, and one of the main evidence, there was no actual evidence because he didn't do it. You can't have evidence he didn't do it. There was no forensic evidence, but it was based on circumstantial. So they asked. It says in the pasuk, Adam kiyamis mikem, and the Gemara tells us, Atem kriyim Adam, you're an Adam, but goyim aren't an Adam. So the judge or the prosecutor said, you see, that's proof that you don't even consider us human, so of course you did it. That was the argument that was made. So again, if they're Dr. Shalom, you have to sort of treat them the same. So Meir Shapiro offered a very good answer to that attack, and it worked. He said, we're called Adam because the word Adam, there is no plural version of the word Adam. So he told the judge, look here, if you were trying to murder anyone else besides a Jew, who would be here? Maybe his parents? It would be empty. Here you have a trial that one Jew here in Russia is being tried, and the courtroom is packed with the entire Jews of the region, and the newspapers all over the world are reporting it. They have reporters from every walk of life here. The whole world is riveted to their radios or to their newspapers to see what's going on. The end of the 1800s. So maybe it was newspapers. It was the end of 1800s. It was newspapers. Everyone's riveted to it. Why? Because a Jew is like one person. If your finger hurts, your whole body hurts. So too, when one Jew's in trouble, we're all together. That you don't find by Goyim. That was a turning point in the trial. It was exonerated at then. So Zok more weiter. Why is it that in the Reisha you're not allowed to help when we're talking about Shvius, and in the Sefer when you're talking about Meister you are allowed to help? Our Mabai is very simple because Roiv Amei Haaretz Ma'ashrim. We can assume that they did take Meiser. Therefore, Zok Rashi, Hilcha Chashasha D'Rabbanan Ba'omahi. It's not a real Chashash Savek Deraisa that we're chashid that she's dealing with pairs of Shemitah. Rather, here it's a minute chumra in Rabbanon that maybe this is tevel. And the Rabbanon relaxed their isser because of Dr. Shalom. There, we're really concerned with a legitimate concern that these are pairs of Shemitah. That was Rabba's term. Rav Amar no, hacha v'amarit Reb Meir. The second case in the Mishnah is not a regular Amarit, which has the connotation that maybe she has pairs of Tevel and she wouldn't make Meiser. No, it's Reb Meir's Amarit who says that this person is trusted Lagabe everything except for Lagabe Tuma. Because it says as follows, Tuhuma v'tahayir d'Rabbanan. And what we're discussing here is only Tumas d'Rabbanan. The Tanya we learned, Ezeu Amarit, what is an Amarit? Kol she'enu oichav chulav b'tahayra. Dibber Meir. He knows an Amarit, someone who's not makbid on eating this chulun b'tahira. That's a very high level. Truma, of course, they would be makbid not to let become tamei. Chulun, you're allowed to let become tamei. But someone who's on such a high madrega, a chaber, he won't even allow his chulun to become tamei. The Amarit that we're talking about is someone who's not so makbid, he's willing to eat his chulun when it's tamei. And that's the Lichshash. Therefore, you can do anything with her because you're not choshed that she's being over Yisurim on Tevel. Rather, the whole concern is maybe she is going to allow her chulin to become tamei. No great big deal, and therefore we let you work with it. That's the very mayor, but the Chachamim Maimrim and Namorit is called Sheini Ma'aser Preirosav, and that's a legitimate concern. So let's see Rabba's teretz in Rashi. Rabba Amar Lo'olam Kemech Tzal Mechza. Really, it's a suffix. We don't say that there's a small remote chance, like Abaye says. It's 50-50. If it was a suffix of whether or not she had taken Trumas and Maestris, you would not be able to help her. We're speaking about a woman who we know for sure we're mesakin their tfuah, and there's for sure no chashash of tevel here. What are we concerned about? What might be the issue here? We're afraid that maybe they're not makbid on tumah. The chulin, the rabbanani. There is no deraisa saying that you cannot eat chulin when it's tamei. It's only a rabbanan to be makbid even to eat your chulin when it is tahar. The Torah lo yisira lechel b'tahira ela truva v'kachim l'bad. So it's only the rabbanan to be extra careful even to eat your chulin b'tahira. So that's the whole concern here. There's no issue deraisa here at all, even if she is tamei. And that's why we allow Deishas Chover to help this woman. So Gemara, how can you say that that's pshat in our Mishnah? What does the Sefer say? So clearly, the only part of the Mishnah that's discussing an issue of Tumah v'Tahira is at the end of the Mishnah of Mishatatlas Hamayim, because before there's any water here, there's no Tumah at all, even Midrabanan. So how could you, Rabbi, say that the discussion in the Sefer, when it comes to the Eishes Chaver, is a discussion of Tumah V'Tahira? Tumah V'Tahira does not enter the scene until the last case of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah discusses mixing the water in. Zok to Gemara, Reisha V'Sefer, B'Tumah V'Tahira. Everything speaking by Tumah V'Tahira. Reisha B'Tumah Schulin, V'Sefer B'Tumah Schal. Zokt Rashi, what does this mean? Reisha v'Sefer b'tumah v'tayra uveperes mechsharin. The Reisha and the Sefer are speaking about pairs that were already wet. The Reisha calls man gilgala. In the Reisha, in other words, side the case of where the water was mixed in, and side before the water was mixed in, it's both a shayla of tumah v'tayra and the pairs are mechsharin. So what's the difference if you mix the water into the flour? It's already mukshar l'kabel tumah from before. The Reisha calls man gilgala. Eina ela tumas chulin, the rabbanon v'legazam mishum yisayeh b'makom dagar shalom v'vat shaloi toichal. The seva b'tumas chal de'raisa is also l'tama b'yad. So let's explain. Really, in both cases, as we said, it's a question of tumah, and as we said earlier, we're going with the Amaorator of Meir, and it's only shal of tumah, and it's speaking, of course, where it was hochsher. So what is the significance of the last case when it talks about mixing water in? It's not because now it's hochsher l'kabel tumah. In fact, the grain already was hochsher l'kabel tumah. What changes when you mix water into dough is now it becomes dough. When it becomes dough, now is triggered the chiyuv to take challah. Up until now, you had dough, you had flour, you had grain that was pure chulin. If it's pure chulin, there's only a shayla b'drabanan, and there is no dakar shalom. Because of dakar shalom, will allow you to work Deishas Chaver to work with Deishas Amaretz, even though there's a chashash that the chulin will become tamei, because that's only a drabanan. But once you mix the water into the dough or into the flour, it becomes dough. Now we've upped the ante. Now deraisas are involved because now it's becoming tevel legabi taking off challah. So this mixture of dough is now also to become tamei even with deraisa. So therefore, in the sefer, once you mix the water in and you're starting to make the dough, there the Eishes Chaver cannot help the Eishes Amoritz because there it's a question of being metama dough, which has truma mixed into it, which is deraisa. So Zok to Gemara Nachama, Reisha v'Sefer b'Tumah. Of course, both cases are speaking about Tumah v'Tahira. However, Reisha b'Tumah schulin, the Reisha before you made dough, it's just a question of chulun becoming tamei. That's only with Rabbanon. There, mipnei dakar shalom, you will allow the Eishes Chaver to work with the Eishes Amoritz. But for Sefer b'Tumas Chala, where there's a deraisa involved, and once again, if we look at Rashi, deraisa she'aser latama b'yad. You're not allowed to make dough that has a chiyuv chala on. You're not allowed to be metamit on purpose. Mishmeres Terumoisai, Ovid Lo Shimur, you have to watch Truma, even Tevel for Truma, that it shouldn't become Tummy. Or a mini Gemara. Is that so? But we learned the Bryce as follows. Toichenin, you're allowed to grind. Umafkidin, Eitzel Oichle Shvius, you're allowed to hire people who are in the grinding business. There are people who own mills and they grind your tool for you. You're allowed to either give it in to a grinder, or you're even allowed to give someone who's going to watch your grain. He has a storage silo and he'll store your grain for you. You're allowed to give it to him. Even though the person you're giving it to is not makbid on shvius, you can give your pairs to them to process or to watch. Not only that, you can also give it the Eitzel Oichle Parisein Betuma, or even people who aren't makbid on Tumah B'Tahira. And Rashi explains why. The second line from the top in Rashi, She'ein chashudim loy lahachla v'loy liga. We're not concerned that he's going to mix up your produce. He's going to keep your produce isolated from any of his other customers or his own, and whatever he gets from you, he's going to give back. Therefore, you don't need to be concerned that he's going to mix in some of his parish shvius. That's usher. He's going to give you back what you gave him, and that's kosher. Of course, you have to be misakin before you give it to them, because a chaver never releases anything from his control unless it's already musakan. So you can give perfect chulun to this guy, and you can be guaranteed, you can rest assured that he'll give you back the exact produce that you gave him. He won't swap it with any of his own stuff, which you wouldn't be allowed to. And even if someone who eats his pears b'tumah, you don't have to worry about. But what you can do, Zok Rashi, is tvua shel oivre avera. If you have tvua of oivre avera, you're allowed to give your wheat to them to grind, and you'll assume that the flour that they give you back is only including the grain that you gave them. But you're not allowed to service them. If you want to provide services to grind for them and they give you their wheat, you're not allowed to. Why? We're choshed that what they're doing is they're using parashvias. So if it's parashvias, you're not allowed to grind it for them and help them process something that's usher to them. Our mission says you're allowed to grind it with her. And we still denied right? We said it's being by a Nama Oretz who eats chulin b'tumah, and we allow her to grind with her. Our problem is and we learned back in our Mishnah that in fact it says b'ferish she's allowed to grind with her. The question is, why aren't you choshed? Why don't you say that she's being misayeya there as well? Zakti Gemara, Amar Abaye, Hasam b'koyin hachashud lechel truma b'tuma askinu. Here, where we said Avaloi la'oichle shvius, Avaloi la'oichle perashem b'tuma, this is talking about a koyin. It's actually a koyin who has truma, and we're choshed. It's not a drabanan. See, by a drabanan, we're not choshed, right? We said by a drabanan, you're allowed to help. If there's only a chash of addition to drabanan, you're allowed to help. Here, the problem is we're choshed that there's an iser da'iraisa. Why? Because hasam the koyin hachoshed lechal truma b'tuma askinu. Here we're talking about a koyin who might be eating his truma, the tuma, which is already an iser da'iraisa, the havel tuma da'iraisa, and therefore avaloi la'oichle shvius v'loi la'oichle perisein b'tuma. You're not allowed to help those people. Zok to Gemara ihachi mafkidin. If that's the case, are you allowed to even give your stuff to him? As Rashi says, how could you give him your paris? Are you not concerned that he'll make your paris tamei? We're talking about a kohen who's not makbid on tamei b'tahira. Remini, we learned mafkidin truma etel Yisrael amaret. You're allowed to be mafkid your truma by a Yisrael amaret. Why? Because we're not afraid that the Yisrael amaret will touch it. Why are we afraid he'll touch it? The Yisrael won't touch the truma. He'll stay away from the truma. He's afraid of truma. He's normally not dealing with truma. But you're not allowed to give your truma to a kohen amaret. You know why? Because we're afraid he'll touch it. If they shali begaspa, he's comfortable with truma. He uses it, and since he uses it, we're afraid he'll touch your truma and make your truma tamei. You're not allowed to cause your truma to become tamei. So how could you say that over here we're speaking about a kohen amoritz? It was a kohen amoritz. You wouldn't even be able to give your pairs to him to watch. The halacha is, if something's in the kli cheres and it has a sealed cover on top of it, even if you touch the outside of that keli, it will not become tamei. So under what circumstances are you allowed to give your peiros to a kohen to watch? That's if it's protected. That even if he'll touch the keli, we're not cautious, you can open the keli. Even if he touches the keli on the outside, it will not be mitamit, and that's where you're allowed to be mafted. Correct, Gemara. The halacha is there's something called tumas hesed, which means if a nida moves something or a zava moves something, even though they don't touch it. For instance, in this keli that's sealed, and she kicks it, or she leans on it, she moves it, that will make everything inside it tamei. So how could you let this man watch it for you if there's no hakpad up to him if it's hired out? It's possible that it will become tamei, even if it's in a keli that's a mukaf tamei possible. You know why in this Bryce on top, it's because it wasn't hukshu l'kabel tuma. Really, you needed this teretz right away. Because what did the Gemara say? It's kli cheres hamukaf tamid pasul. That helps why you're allowed to be mafkid to them. But toichanin, how can you let them grind it? They're for sure taking it out of the keli if they're grinding it. So for that, you have this teretz now. Kam b'perish hukshu, kam b'perish hukshu. When do we say that you're allowed to be mafkid pairs, even though he might be metamid, is if it's pairs that are not hoshel l'kabel tuma. So therefore, we're not concerned about tuma because he can't be metamid. But if it's pairs hoshel, in fact, there's a shayla of a deraisa because he might be metamid your truma, and in fact, you're not allowed to give it to him. Urmini. So the Gemara wants to ask another question. Hamoyle chitin l'toichen chusin. You want to bring your chitin to a grinder who happens to be a kuti. Or the grinder that you're bringing it to, the miller that you're bringing it to, is an amoritz. In other words, we're concerned that they're going to be matam. Hare'elu becheskason, we consider them becheskason. Rashi says, shein choshid lahachlif, v'she'edim usher u'perishvius. You don't have to worry that he's going to take your pairs, which are perfectly chulin mutudika pairs, and he'll swap them and give you his pairs that are either tevel or that are perishvius. We're not concerned that he'll do that. So Areil b'chaskosan l'maisru l'shvius, avoloi l'tuma. But we're still afraid that maybe he touched it. So our problem is here we have a brayso that says you are concerned about tuma. Yet at the top of Amid we said umafkidin etaloich l'shvius, and we're not worried about tuma. Once again, correct Gemara, hi my rumya. Why are you asking me the same kasha over and over again? Didn't we just tell you there's a simple way to make a distinction between braysos that say we are worried about tuma and braysos that say that we're not worried about tuma? What is the distinction? Labu kimna beperish lehuchsharu. Didn't we already tell you that you could say the braysos that hold you're allowed to give the pairs to these people to watch, and you're not worried that they're going to become tamei, are speaking that the pairs were not huksharu l'kabel tuma. So there's no concern of tuma. The braysos that say you're not allowed to give it to an amor to watch is speaking with pairs that are huksharu l'kabel tuma. So why would you ask me a kasha when you already have a silver bullet to pay for any one of these kashas? Anytime you encounter a brayso that said you are allowed to give them something and you don't have to worry about tuma, is speaking by pairs that cannot become tamei. And anytime you find a brayso that says that you're not allowed to give it, it's speaking about pairs that were that could become tamei. So, Frek the Gemara, if that's the case, you're right. You have a very good point. Udu ka'arila, my ka'arila. Why in the world did the Gemara even introduce this brayso of a moilechit l'taychagusi? It was so obvious. We just a moment ago made that distinction between perish hukshu and perish loyukshu. So why would we ask a kasha that's so obviously not shver? Because we've just explained to you the terms upon which it would be mutter and the terms upon it wouldn't be mutter. Zokt Gemara, you know why? The truth is there's no kasha there at all. But the Gemara had a different interest to introduce this brayso. And the Gemara wanted to talk about this brayso. The Gemara asked a kasha that was obviously not shver because we had already pampered it, but we just wanted to say, now that we're talking about this brayso, let me ask you some other questions about the brayso. So it was a simple way of the Gemara introducing that brayso to us so that we can discuss the brayso, other facets of this brayso. The Amoira wanted to discuss this brayso with other kashas, so therefore he asked a kasha that was relevant to our sugya, even though he knew the answer already. As Rashi says, Al hadod katani b'chaskos on the maestros. That's what the Gemara here wants to focus on. That it says when you give it to a toichin akusi or toichin amoritz, you're not concerned that he swapped it out. That's really the part that we want to focus on. Nothing to do with the tumah b'tahira. That's why the Gemara brought it here and asked the kasha, but really we never thought it was fair. So what is now? We're going to change subjects. Up until now, we were discussing tumah b'tahira, when you need to be concerned, when not, and it's totally on if the parish works through. Now let's go back to another thing. The Brisa seems to say that if you're giving payers to a kuti or an amoritz, you don't have to be concerned that they're going to give you back other payers. You can rest assured they're going to give you back your own payers. I had a licensed boiler mechanic that used to work for me, who told me that before he was working in my job, the company that he worked for serviced crematoria. So there's a lot of places, funeral homes, that have crematoria. As a matter of fact, next door to Koil Dirshu, north of the building, there's a mausoleum there. And in that place, they actually cremate bodies there. And then they give you a special shelf with your little jug of your Zayda, and you put it there on the shelf, and you have your Zayda's ashes there. South, right. You're there the 4-1. So sometimes you see the smoke coming out of the ovens. So my mechanic told me, if you think for half a second that you get your own ashes, you're out of your mind. You think they know whose ashes are whose when they clear out that oven? So there you have to be cautious that you're not getting back what you gave them. But if you're giving them Paris of a Zoivai, you can assume you're going to get back what you gave them. I think you remember when Larry said that? Okay. Dr. Gemara?
I think that was Frank, actually.
Frank?
Frank, yeah.
No, I don't think Frank would have had the nerves to climb into one of those ovens.
I hear you.
He would have been afraid of his own shadow. So Dr. Gemara, Harei Elu v'cheskosan l'maisru l'shviyas. Frank Gemara l'chaluv l'chashinan. Are you telling me we're never concerned that the vendor is going to swap out your pairs? This is a very beautiful brisa. It's a chash of Isser, but it's a beautiful brisa. How a mother-in-law loves her children. Maybe not my mother-in-law, but generally. Hanoisein l'chamoisoi. What if you give your mother-in-law dough? She knew how to make the most beautiful challah. You know, a lot of women, they don't know how to braid challah with 6. They could braid with 3. They don't know how to braid so good. It's a malacha to know how to braid the challah with 6. So he would give the dough to his shviger, and his shviger would braid it for him to make the challah. So hanoisein l'chamoisoi. The halacha is before he give, and let's say he's a Talmud Chacham, and he married a girl who's a Bas Ha'aretz. She must be wealthy. But if not, why would he have married her? So you have a Talmud Chacham, and his shver is supporting him in Koil, but his shver is an Amoritz. So therefore, before he gave dough to his shviger as a Talmud Chacham, he made sure that it was Chulin, it was not Tevel. He gave it to her, Ma'aser Eshu Noisin, and then when she gives back the beautifully braided chalas, the Eshu Noita Limena. You have to take ma'aser again on the dough, the braided challah that she gives you back. Why? Because we're afraid that what she's going to do is, let's say you gave her a bad piece of dough, there was a rotten piece. We're afraid that she's going to cut that out and she's going to give you her own to be mashlim it. Correct, Gemara. That's not because we're choshit someone is dishonest and they're swapping. Adrabah, that's because she cares. Hasam kidekatani taima. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, roitzehi b'takanas pita. She's concerned about her daughter. She doesn't want her daughter to suffer with a part of the challah that was the dough went bad. So she on her own adds to it. She loves her daughter and she wants to take care of her kids. And ublusha mechasna, but she's embarrassed from her son-in-law that she would cut out some and not give back whatever she got. So Mamela, she adds her own without saying anything. So normally, Avada, you're not choshed someone would swap. The only reason why you're choshed someone's going to swap is when they have best of intentions, when they want to help. That's when you're choshed. But Avada, normally, you don't have to be choshed that when you give in payers to an woman, he's going to give you back something differently. That's all. Are you telling me we normally are not concerned? But now we learn. What happens is Talmud Rabbi. What if a Talmud is learning Torah and he has to stay somewhere? So they used to, the people in the city would put up the Talmidim. And his balabos was an Amoritz. And he would go to a restaurant, people would give their dough, and the woman would bake it for them. So he gave this Talmud, Chal Chacham, gave a woman dough, again, he has to treat it like his mother-in-law. Ma'aser Eshul Noisellah, he's only allowed to give her pure chulin. The Eshul Noitel Mimena, and when he gets back to cook bread, he has to invite her to take meiser again Mipnei Shum Machalefes. Zoktamar, there again, Hasam Meir Ba'amra, Bai Be'Rab Lechel Chamima, Ba'Neichel Karira. The Bai Be'Rab should eat bread that's already warmed up and it could be spoiled. The Talmud Chacham, so even the Amaratzim has such respect for the Talmidim. You tell me that this yeshiva bacher should eat spoiled bread and I should eat good, fresh bread? No. If there's any spoilage, she's going to replenish it with her own. Again, it's because of the best of intentions. I'm not doing a ve'er, I'm doing a mitzvah. The Talmud shouldn't have good bread. So I'm assuming normally it stays cool, it doesn't spoil, and maybe after a couple of days when it gets hot, there's spoilage. So we're going to go back to the original principle. Are you telling me still normally you're not kosher that the vendor swapped it only because of these two exceptions, the mother-in-law and the pundigis? This is our brayso, similar to our Mishnah. And the Eishes Chaver can grind together with the Eishes Amaretz bizman she tameya, avoloy bizman she tahira, but not when she's tahor. Why is that? Because when the Eishes Chaver is tameya, the kibbutz to be made tuma ain't a regila liga b'tahiris. She's going to make sure not to touch the iris, and therefore we're not afraid that she's going to take from the grain that she's working with and put it into her mouth, because when a woman, an Eishes Chaver is tummy, she doesn't touch food because she doesn't want to be metamed. But Reb Shimon Lazar, she still shouldn't grind with her friend when she's tummy. If neishechaverta noisenes law vaychelas. So Zok Rashi noisenes law alma chashuda eishes amaretz lignog mishal baila v'litul chavita. You're afraid she'll give her from chulin that she has, that's tummy, and she'll say, here, take some. So you're chayshid that her friend will offer her food. You're not, a woman is not allowed to offer food to a guest without her husband's permission. It's her husband's food. You know that? She's careful what she touches. So she won't take anything and put it into her mouth because maybe it's teva, right? This might be a question of teva. She won't want to be talking about teva, so she'll make sure. Now, if it's dry, it's not hukshul kabel tumah, there's no concern. But once you put it in her mouth, it gets wet, that's when you're going to have a problem. So she's going to be careful with what she does. So we're not worried that she's going to eat. But the problem is, we're still concerned because her friend might give her, and the problem is als gneva, the problem of gneva. But whatever it is, you see that a woman would offer her friend food that belongs to her husband without asking permission. This is a woman who we are choshed that she steals. You're not going to be concerned that she'll swap stuff out? On Rabbi Yosef Hasam Nami, there again, she's not stealing from her husband to be bad. She's saying, I have to give my friend. My friend is here helping me. I'm not going to offer her something to eat. Every ox, when he works, she's allowed to eat. This woman is helping me. I have to offer her some food. But stamazoi, for no reason to be machlib, she would never do that. So, I'm sorry? I'm not sure if it works over here, but I'll call upon them. The Gemara still maintains that you're not choshed stamazoi. If you give good payers, they're going to give you back. Also, payers you're not choshed unless there's a specific reason, like a mother-in-law or like a pundakis or like a woman who's helping her friend. So interesting to note, there's a famous story with two bucherim was flagging Essen Tag. In ein bucher to kluk, bakluk. Do you understand Yiddish a little bit? Ein bucher to bakluk to the zweite bucher. Oy vay, jede Nacht kommt man Balbus. Und was geht mich? Kasche. Wie viel Kasche kann ich schon essen? So the other book says, mit dem hast du verribbelt, mit dem hast du Zures, Halavai wollte ich mal Kasche jede Nacht. Wenn ich komme jede Nacht, beginnt mich Terizim. Hatte nicht du wegen dem, in jede Nacht nicht du wegen dem, Halavai kann ich Kasche. Ich habe noch Terizim. Okay, have a good day.